Hello and good morning, good evening and good day to the world. And we have the wonderful Dr. Andrew Vincent today. We have had many wonderful exchanges. Dr. Andrew Vincent practices in Queensland and he's a graduate of the PIT, Phillip Institute of Technologies, one of the early colleges in Australia, which then became RMIT. Andrew not only is one of the most stimulating conversationalists around, he has the ability to bloody well crack me up even in an email. And I don't know how he does it, but he definitely needs to get a job as a, maybe Rowan Atkinson's sidekick. Andrew, welcome to my little channel here.
Thanks, Joe.
So, Andrew, how bad is it out there? How good is it? How horrible is it? What is it? What's going through your head, mate, at the moment? Then we'll talk about the future.
Righto. Well, I've got time to speak to you now because we're in lockdown in the CBD in Brisbane. And whilst we're an essential service, we can see some people. But a lot of people have just decided to have a break and stay back. But we've had a new person. We've got a few people tomorrow. So it's worth coming in, and we're using that time to do a meeting with you.
And how do you feel about current directions in the profession?
Oh, look, I think we're reinventing the wheel a few times. I'm reading a book from the 70s, the Contain and Eliminate book at the moment, and looking at some of the challenges. And apart from the dates, I don't think things change too much. And that at times can get you somewhat frustrated and think that we're losing direction. But then I've been doing some tutoring at CQU, the chiropractic program.
Oh, nice.
And it's been refreshing to meet chiropractors and to see the range of both young and mature age students coming through. And I think we're in pretty good hands with the subset of people that really want to be full-on, full-time chiropractors. There'll always be part-time chiropractors with part-time interest, and they're well represented. But if you look at the old Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, I think there's a subset of chiropractors that are going to carry us forward rather well. So it's our job to pass on the flame. It's
good to know. What's one of your, obviously you love practice. You've been in practice for
35 years.
What's your favourite extracurricular? You've got a pretty, well-rounded life, family and whatever, but what's your outside of clinical practice part of chiropractic you enjoy? Do you like going to meetings and stirring the pot or something like that?
And I don't, if I'm going to stir the pot, I need to have a reasonably good recipe to be dealing with as well. I like to go well organised, and if I've got an issue, I need to come with the history of it and potentially a solution. So my interest has been in the antipathy towards chiropractic, and those that would have us not exist, and those that would have us be discriminated upon, and to have our existence as a profession put under threat. And I won't stop if I find that occurring. And that's where I think you and I have struck up a friendship. We've come from quite different backgrounds, but in our various roles in similar state associations, I think we've found a common thread. And I don't stick my neck out as far as you do, but I'll certainly give you the fodder to run with.
Well, and also you need, if you are going to stick your neck out, you better do it with someone watching your back. And nearly everyone I've interviewed in this series so far, people like, John Waterhouse was on earlier. He's always had my back, but people like you have really, the antipathy files that you've collected. Give us a little bit of a taste of what you've discovered in standing up for the profession against people who would have us just shut shop.
Well, when you speak to people about the fact that there are pressures to try and eliminate the profession of chiropractic, initially people think it's an historical point of interest and not current. It doesn't take long to give them some brand new data and very current information and let them see that fairly overt and covert methods are being used to try and contain chiropractic. Keith Simpson did his PhD 20 years ago now on the influence of the American Medical Association on the development of chiropractic in Australia. And there are some streams that are still alive and well with other interest groups that would have us not exist. And that took Keith at least full-time 10 years to work on his PhD. It's a marvellous read. It's available for those that are interested via us. We'll let you know about it. It exists on ResearchGate. And he did great work, and we ran with some of those ideas. I was in association meetings with Keith, and he and I worked back in the 90s on legislative matters and other issues to do with third-party payment and other issues. And I've pretty well picked up the cudgel and run with it ever since, and created the file that he started, and then followed the work that Keith did on stopping the AMA's ethics-based boycott of chiropractic referrals in Australia. And that led me to then continue to collect data and at times take on individuals who might otherwise be dismissive and attacking chiropractic.
What happens when you approach a group and identify it, as opposed to, have you ever faced anyone personally, like face-to-face, and taken them to task?
Oh, yes. I've been on interviews and radio interviews, live talkback, and when you just gently don't get into the emotion of it, and I can thank my mild Asperger's syndrome diagnosis to let me realise that there's no benefit in getting angry about it right there and then. So when I've actually gone and spoken to the Queensland Skeptics on chiropractic, and a wonderful range of cardigans that they were wearing, and I was jealous of their protector packets in their pockets, because they had multiple pens compared to my one pen in my pocket. And but once you start chatting and you realise that the background science they were using wouldn't even get accepted in Wikipedia, gently explained it at a science level and got the emotion out of it. Oh, well, that part of chiropractic is all right then. And when you're able to dissect the issue and put it back in the rational way they think they are being, it's actually quite okay. I tried to join Friends of Science in Medicine, but I got stopped from joining because I wouldn't denounce being a chiropractor. And so that was interesting. Yeah, I tried, but
you mean to join, you had to denounce and renounce your religious...
I had to denounce that I adhered to some of the principles and practices of being a chiropractor. And when I asked which aspects of the science of what I do they had an issue with, that led into a circular argument, and it was decided that it's best that I not join. And so there you go. But that's okay. So when we have a discussion at that level and you meet someone, we had a public debate on chiropractic in the Brisbane City Hall with various representatives of the Australian Medical Association and others, and that went exceptionally well in the 90s.
Wow.
We were accused of skewing the debate and preloading the audience, but it was open to the public, and any of the public came, and it was a great chat. But since then, I've not ever had a chance to ever go live with an AMA representative again. It's normally pre-recorded, and I have to go first, and then the AMA or other representatives comment afterwards and get the final right of reply. But that's just tricky journalism, in my point.
So it's interesting that you're very positive about education and the future chiropractors, and I am too. I've seen and experienced some wonderful young minds coming through. But do you think that the AMA ever accepting us as dead in the water type degree of, will they ever turn around and say, hey, cousin, do you think it's finished?
I don't think that political medicine, and if I'm defining the difference now, political medicine, which is the major component of the AMA, its position as a membership union is to remove a competitor, and it begrudgingly removed its ethics-based boycott when the ACCC confronted them and showed them evidence, and they were forced to change their rules. But then you must realise that every day I'm sending a note back to a patient's GP or recommending that the file I've got or a copy of the X-ray report I've got, the patient might like to take a picture and have a chat with their GP about this matter. So I quite specifically want to delineate between political medicine and those medicos and other health providers that are out there with the patient's best interest in mind. And I think we need to strongly draw a line in the sand. But to stop what I will call the fight against discrimination, I think is weak and should not be stopped. And no other profession is being asked to stop standing up for its rights of its patients and its practitioners. And so I will not ever stop fighting any issues that I see are discriminatory or unfair, or stop Australians getting access to a qualified professional.
And as you say, the AMA's almost policy for existence, reason for being, is they actively wipe out competition. They actively and jealously support only their members. So we're actually talking about it's the nature of the game. And also there are doctors that I think are wonderful, as you mentioned, that probably would come up against them as well. Medical doctors that are really patient-centred.
It's interesting to look in the US when we look at matters, for example, about the current history on which entities are talking rationally about, for example, stroke risk when it comes to anything to do with neck adjustments. The American Heart Association has come out with one of the best long copy discussions on relative risks and come out very favourable and no issue with approaching it. So it's interesting that the Heart Foundation and the journal Stroke and other medical entities, not the political position of the American Medical Association, but those with a patient focus at heart, are coming out with rational scientific discussion, saying that it's a valid approach. And when you weigh it up, its safety record, anything to do with chiropractic care, is as good or better than current medical management of similar conditions. That's the strong position I have. And that discussion, be it at a barbecue or a dinner, automatically diffuses the issue. And it's a total different mix to some of the media spin that we see, because it's inherently the shock value of a media spin cycle. But if you get out of the heat of that, and interestingly, since I've taken personal action against a couple of practitioners who've gone into the media and been detrimental to chiropractic, one fellow making commentary about chiropractic, I took a personal complaint against him to the medical board. He got a show cause notice, and he's never gone public again with any media comment about chiropractic. So I just see that as a rational way of approaching a detractor, saying, where's your evidence? You haven't got the evidence. You've just breached your own code of medical practice, which is what I stood him to as the test. And he has not made a sound since. So that's gentle and it's not personal, it's business. And I get that. And again, as I said, when we talk to medicos, the personal discussions and the patients that we care for together, there's no issue. And I think strongly the association, the ACA, and when I talk to young chiropractors, need to strongly be able to delineate that. So we need a strong position for our profession, and then we need if it's ever going to happen, collaboration with medicos that want to co-manage with chiros. But in a fee-for-service system in Australia, reality is it's not going to happen very often. Most of the collaborative work you look at, you've got all the professionals that are collaborating are all on a salary. So they don't care if they see 3 or 15 that day, they're on the same salary. So collaboration works when dollars don't matter. Right. And that's, again, not personal, it's business.
Yeah. Which brings me to the thought, so that if you've had successful confrontational, but, you know, dispassionate approach and it's worked, and do you ever see something like the Wilk versus AMA case ever coming to light again? I mean, for people who don't know, there was a major challenge to chiropractic defamation via USA AMA, which was won, and we won it. And they were accused of and found guilty of just trying to eliminate the profession of chiropractic. Do you ever see something like that ever rising up again?
I think it is rising, I'm going to say covertly. Now, that doesn't make me a conspiracy theorist. I personally took many years and many attempts with my final, what shall we say, position with a complaint against the AMA and Friends of Science and Medicine to the ACCC for this very same issue. But slander and anti-competitive rules are different in Australia to the US. So the covert side of things I'm talking about were that when I presented the ACCC with my information that there was what we could see as a concerted effort to remove a competitor from the marketplace, but the smoking gun that the ACCC required was a memorandum agreement or understanding between 3 entities with the express purpose of removing a competitor from the market. And you might look at examples of building industry cases, cement companies, supermarkets working together to control price and remove a competitor. So the smoking gun's probably out there, but at the moment it's reasonably well hidden. And interestingly, the reason I couldn't get one of the entities, which is fairly public, I suppose I could mention, when I looked at an action against Friends of Science and Medicine, interestingly, Friends of Science and Medicine have registered themselves as a charity. And charities are exempt from action from the ACCC for anti-competitive practices because the areas of interest recommended by Friends of Science and Medicine are public safety and public health. And so under the auspices of that, they are able to make comment against chiropractors. However, if I made comment against one of those people in the public realm, it could be action for slander. So the interesting thing is the rules of engagement aren't fair even in that matter. So that was interesting. However, we sought, with the thanks of the money from Queensland branch of the CAA at the time, the Chiropractors Association, which is now ACA. And the Queensland branch felt that my work was strong enough to get an opinion from a QC in Brisbane to actually still, as a profession, take action against the AMA and Friends of Science and Medicine for the very matters we're talking about. But because of the things I mentioned, matters of commentary in public health and the non-existence at the moment of a memorandum of understanding between a group of practitioners against chiropractors, it wasn't enough to trigger a direct action. However, there was commentary in the 6-page response from the ACCC that shouldn't stop me looking at a civil action for what I perceived, or a group of my colleagues and I would perceive as a business threat or a difficulty running practice. But it was out of ACCC's remit because their rules didn't cover a charity. The UC said it would be a long, painful and expensive process. And writing a book about it again would be a bestseller amongst about 17 chiropractors. And the rest would have other things better to do, like photographing their latte and saying blessed and things like that. So, sorry. It's one of those things that slowly needs to be just burning in the background. And every now and again, when a detractor breaches the rules, they need to be called to task. And similarly, we need to recognise that some of our own colleagues need to have the same thing done. If we're going to play rules, it needs to be on both sides. So it is a slow burn. It would be exciting to try and mount a great big class action and have another film like All the President's Men done with a gym that's got a bent, and we all stay up all night and do these things, but we'd all have heart attacks, I think, Joe, and that's not healthy.
I think you've found a nice little balance and made it a little, because it is a game, you know, that reminds me of when I complained to the HCCC, Healthcare Complaints Commission, about the Australian Skeptics saying that chiropractic has not a jot of benefit. So I said to the HCCC, they need to refrain from giving healthcare advice. And similarly, the Australian Skeptics are not healthcare professionals. We can't act against them. But it didn't stop me being slandered all over the internet, which now I'm quite proud of, because if you're slandered by Australian Skeptics, you get the likes of Karen Phelps, I think, you know, she's not bad.
Well, interestingly, when some of the most vicious attacks on chiropractic were happening in 2016, 2017, it led to some commentary from some very broad-thinking medicos that are looking right across the spectrum and have a style of practice that is broad scope, saying that that as medicos, they needed to be very careful throwing stones because their glass house was not very robust, and that applying the same blowtorch of scrutiny to some medical procedures would have them found wanting. And so I think it actually created, as you would suggest, somewhat of a settling of the waters to a point. And I think when I mentioned the issue that it goes, you know, the matters go covertly, the quiet background, for example, if you've got a lecturer in public health having students doing essays on complaints about chiropractors, and you're making it an accessible piece, and they must go out and download rogue chiropractors' websites and then do a research project or an essay on it. And then interestingly, you use that essay as a complaint to the Chiropractors Board or to the Australian Health Practitioner Regulation Authority. That to me smacks of a vexatious claim. And I find that is not in the public interest if you've gone and searched and looked and cut and pasted to make something seem worse than it is and out of context. But one would hope someone's not spending university money on such things and have to do something like that. So,
God forbid, no, could not be true. Who would do such a thing, really?
Is that the right use of public money? One would have to question that at the time.
Yeah, but I'm sure it doesn't happen.
I would know. And so when I go to my university students and say that, look, we have an embarrassing underbelly with some of our colleagues who are lazy and they pay money for an overseas website that might work in America with different rules, we show a lack of professionalism because some of what we say isn't substantiable, able to be substantiated. And so I wear that, I get that. But if you looked at the non-syndicated complaints against chiropractic, we are one of the least complained professions on the AHPRA list of registered professions. But someone can skew the data by creating their own anonymous complaints. So I recognise it's an ongoing process, but that's fine. And with my students coming in, they don't hide from that. My university students, I say, look, understand where we're fitting, understand why your first attempt to meet a medico and say hi when you start your own basic new practice is that all they've seen is the rubbish end of what we've got to offer and the distorted reporting of what we've got to offer. So give that medico a second chance, see if they're available for a coffee. You know they're busy, so one hint is ask them if they're available for a coffee in 2 months' time at 10 a.m. because you know they've got no appointments then. And then you bring the practice and book it out. And if you want to book in as a patient so they get a long visit fee, that's okay, because there's probably some health advice during your discussion.
That'll work. Well, I'm grateful you're out there, Andrew, because that's how actually things get done. It's that slow trickle that builds the river. It's that little weed among the concrete, and you never move anything too quick anyway. So it's an interesting notion.
Everything you do when a patient then comes in rather affronted and feeling upset, they are often then comforted when you say, look, if you give it to the public and you ask the public to comment on chiropractic, and of interest, you might find there was a recent review on safety for children done in Victoria, the Safer Care Victoria review. It got the single biggest number of public submissions on a matter in its history of Victorian Parliament.
Oh, wow.
17,000 unsolicited responses from the public, and 99.7% of them were positive. Any other profession would give their back teeth for that sort of response and positivity. And there are good researchers in the paediatric chiropractic space who are summarising and looking at putting that into a wonderfully read document. But if you're ever having a bored lockdown day, just go on to that Victorian site and look at the public submissions. Our patients,
I'll put the link in this under this
that would
video.
be nice, because our patients are very, very happy. And so if an individual patient feels that they're a bit left out or they've been, are they in the right place? So look, if you're worried about what might happen with your child visiting a chiropractor, just scroll through what patients that have gone and experienced care and been asking, and in a good 60% of those patients who are attending the chiropractor, they're also seeing their medico. So it's not COVID, it's not the wall, because a professional that's dealing with a child has the skill set to do that, and if they don't, they know when to refer. So I don't get worried about these things, and I try and enthuse the students at university on that very matter, because you see the noisy bits, you see the bits that smell wrong, and you feel skewed. Another one of my students, his research project a couple of years ago up here in Queensland was to look at the negative comments on Twitter. So he took a year's worth of Twitter and searched chiropractic on Twitter. Wow. And found that 95% of the comments were positive.
Wow.
But all we see with our cranky old eyes are the negative ones, and we get our guile up. Some of us have heart attacks, and some of us go for a run instead. And whenever you manage your stress, and you just deal with it. And so I think we need to realise that in the open market, we're seen as safe, effective, and caring for our patients. And that very success is why we have such strong detractors, because without funding and pharmaceutical money, certain medical practices wouldn't be operating. If a GP's practice had to operate on cash, most of them wouldn't be operating.
I think that the point about the paediatric survey is worth just illuminating. We were accused, it started in Victoria, didn't it? Accused of horrid things and outcomes from treating babies and children. And so everyone listening to this should go and check the link I'm going to put down there, because as you say, you said it was the single
biggest public
response.
submission to a response for feedback in the history of the Victorian Parliament.
Oh dear. Yeah, that's huge.
And whilst I'm not a conspiracy theorist, some interesting information was that a video that triggered the response was a chiropractor doing a assessment technique, which on the face of it, without background context, looked somewhat surprising, holding a child up by one leg, which other professionals do. Other practitioners dealing with children do that. I'll leave it to someone who looks at it to make their own decision. The chiropractor what shall we say, confessed that it was perhaps the wrong context and took a reprimand for that. Interestingly, chiropractic detractors kept that video for about 8 months. So if it was such a safety issue and needing immediate action, it surprised me that it was kept quiet for 8 months. And the morning it was released, surprisingly, on a Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock in the morning, representatives from various medical associations were all available for comment at 8 o'clock on the same day, and surprisingly had the same comments to say. It's almost as if it was pre-planned, and not a public health concern.
Yeah.
When various professions commented on chiropractic, which is also interestingly the insurer for chiropractors, for the first time in history, opened its books, opened its ledger of complaints about injuries to patients, and was able to tell a government survey that they had no cases of any injury to children by any registered chiropractor insured by them in the history of them insuring chiropractors for any person under 15 years of age. So no claims, no cases, and the other professionals who were attacking chiropractic had no cases, no claims, and when they sent information in, the background on those claims, that children that were injured, one was injured by a dentist, one was a non-named practitioner, and one was another manipulative style therapist, I believe. None were chiropractors, but it was handed to the government as if they were chiropractic injuries, and they were not. And my issue when I've gone to the ACCC is that those professionals making comment like that ought to have known, should have known, or did know and did not disclose, which in my mind is false, misleading, and deceptive. And it's what's driven me for 25 years questioning my detractors.
Yes. And those records, as a matter of fact, must have gone back 30 years plus.
Easily.
Yeah. Just so people know, they weren't 10 years of claims either. They were like a generation or more. Yeah.
And so we are looking at a situation where the safety record is enviable.
Yeah.
And the outcomes will be interesting to see. It's difficult for the profession to comment much more at the moment because right at the time it was to be released and the review summarised, we had COVID hit, and there's been a change in governmental instruments that are looking at it, and our profession is still looking. So one must be careful in making broad scope final commentary. So I leave people to read it themselves, but I do look forward to a good summary, and I do look forward to the different professions coming forward with an apology to say that they didn't mean to be false, misleading, and deceptive. They were misinformed, and we'll look forward to accepting their apology.
Brilliant. Well, what else you got to add? Any other
I think
thoughts?
it's a wonderful time. It's a wonderful time to be a chiropractor because sitting on your backside with lockdowns leads to coffee and cake, less activity, more screen time, and postural syndromes that patients need to get adjusted. And when I talk to the students, one of the interesting points I'm bringing up is that if you end up with a spinal joint dysfunction, aka a subluxation, on its own, it does not go away. You adapt as best as you can until you run out of adaptation measures. So I'm spending my time talking to chiropractic students that this isn't wacko science. It's well documented that unmanaged problems start to become worse. So if you look at a dysfunction in the spine, as you mentioned, a weed in the concrete, a couple of good showers and that weed can create a bigger crack in that concrete. So you need to go and weed that spine of yours and get adjusted.
Now, just curiously, you have a permanent position at CQU?
I've been brought in as a tutor, tutoring fourth-year students.
Yep.
I was in neurological assessment last semester, and I've been asked to come in as a field practitioner with field practice skills in adjustive styles for this semester, because the CQU and other universities have recognised that 2020 lost a lot of contact, and they've upped the number of tutors, and they've upped the number of tutors per student to help maintain the delivery of skills. And I must say, it's just wonderful to see the interest and the intensity of which students are taking on the training. There's no such thing as a student that doesn't want to be there, because one of the benefits of a HECS debt is you need it to earn its keep. And there's no such thing as a student who's just banging around. They are, it's great to work with them. Yeah.
Andrew Vincent, how lucky they are to have you there, mate, and how lucky I am to know a living legend. Thank you for chatting with us.
Just keep paying it forwards, mate.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.